Have you ever walked into a room that feels like time has stopped? The air is too still, the lights too dim. And even though there are people breathing, sitting, existing, there's an emptiness so loud you can hear it press against your skin. That's what it's like inside some of America's forgotten nursing homes. Not all of them, but enough. Enough that the silence itself has become a kind of language, spoken in whispers, long stares, and the absence of anyone who bothers to ask questions. This is not a story about neglect you already expect. It's not just about the bruises, or the bed sores, or the cries in the dark. This is about something deeper, a quiet unraveling of human dignity, a place where people go not just to die, but to be slowly erased. America has over 15,000 nursing homes. More than 1.3 million people live in them. To the outside world, they look like places of safety, places built for rest, for care, for stability. But if you peel back the brochure smile, beneath the polished tiles, beneath the family room signs, you'll sometimes find something else entirely. A machine designed not to heal, but to forget. Because here's what few will say out loud. A nursing home is not built to remember you. It is designed to make you manageable. Over 30% of nursing home residents in the U.S. are under the age of 65. Some are recovering from surgery. Some live with chronic illness. Some are simply unwanted. And many of them? They're not temporary. They're permanent, with no advocate, and no one visiting. Over 60% of residents receive 0 visitors in a given year. Let that settle. Imagine living out your final decade in a place where no one remembers your birthday. No one calls to say your name. No one even knows you're still alive. That's not just loneliness. That's invisible death. In slow motion. Anna was 81. Her room hadn't changed in 6 years. Same curtains. Same cracked photograph of her husband in uniform. Same soft-spoken aide who came and went like a ghost. Her son lived 20 minutes away. He hadn't visited since 2017. When she died in her bed, during a shift change, no one noticed for 5 hours. The official note said, "Expired peacefully." What it didn't say was this. Her call light had been blinking red for nearly 40 minutes. It's tempting to blame the staff, to call it laziness, or cruelty, or bad training. But the truth is darker, more systemic, more chilling. The average nursing aide in America earns $15 an hour. For that, they're expected to feed, clean, reposition, and sometimes restrain up to 20 residents per shift. One aide described it like this. It's not care, it's triage. You look at who's bleeding, who's choking, and you ignore the rest. That's not indifference. That's burnout, weaponized by underfunding. At night, many homes run on skeleton staff. Imagine one nurse for every 40 patients. Imagine 5 emergencies in 20 minutes. Imagine having to choose, again and again, whose life matters more tonight. In 2018, Human Rights Watch released a report. Hidden inside it was this number. Over 179,000 residents were being chemically restrained. They weren't being treated. They were being silenced. It's called off-label use. Technically legal, functionally indistinguishable from sedation abuse, especially when the patient has dementia. They can't consent. They can't object. They just fade. One daughter visited her mother 3 weeks after a medication change. "She didn't know my name," she said. "She couldn't lift her head. I kept saying, "Hi, Mom, hi, Mom," but it felt like yelling into a grave. You might ask, how does this happen? The answer is simple. Nursing homes are paperwork machines. They're funded by Medicaid, Medicare, and insurance. Not by how well they care, but by how well they document care. The system is built to serve the chart, not the person. A nurse may have 45 seconds to reposition a patient before moving on, because the state requires a box checked every 2 hours. But what if that patient is scared? What if they say, "Please, wait"? What if they say nothing at all? None of that matters, if it's not coded. In the system, they're not people. They're a fall risk, a billing code, a task to complete. Some homes are worse than others, much worse. These are the for-profit warehouses, owned not by doctors, but by investors. In one leaked memo, staff were told to limit hospital transfers because hospitalizations reduce reimbursement. Let that sink in. Your stroke might be too expensive. A former administrator said, "If someone fell and wasn't bleeding, we were told to monitor." Monitor meant hope they didn't die. Then there's the memory care unit, a locked hallway, alarms on the doors, wallpaper made to look like windows, but the windows don't open, and sometimes the patient doesn't belong there. In some states, people without any dementia diagnosis are placed into memory care just because their family signed a paper. Why? Because memory care pays better. The worse your condition, the more you're worth. To someone. You might think there are inspections. There are, on paper. But in some states, thousands of homes went more than 3 years without a single in-person visit. One retired inspector said, "We found a man with stage 4 bed sores, down to the bone. The facility reported him as resting comfortably. So families take matters into their own hands. Some hide cameras in clocks. Others install legal granny cams. What they find is worse than they feared. A man slapped for not swallowing a pill. A woman crying for help for 2 hours. A resident dragged off camera and returned with a dislocated shoulder. In one video, a staff member waves food just out of reach, taunting a nonverbal father as he weeps. The staffer was fired. The facility stayed open and full. And yet, inside these halls are also people who fight. Nurses who sing during sponge baths. Aides who bring snacks with their own pay. A janitor who stops his mop just to say, "Hey, sweetheart, I see you." They are warriors in scrubs, holding the line, inside a broken fortress, but they're exhausted and often punished for speaking up, because in this system, silence is safer than compassion. Why doesn't this make front-page news? Because the victims are quiet. They don't riot. They don't sue. They don't trend. They're old. They're frail. They're inconvenient. But truth doesn't stay buried. Not forever. Because someone always remembers, and when enough people speak, whispers become thunder. Not everyone stays silent. In almost every facility, there's someone who notices, someone who speaks, a nurse who refuses to sign off on false reports, a CNA who takes photos of bruises, an administrator who dares to ask, "Why is this resident medicated every 4 hours when their file says PRN?" But in this system, truth is not rewarded. Over the last decade, thousands of staff members who reported problems were either transferred to night shifts, given more patients, investigated for minor infractions, or simply fired. One CNA in Illinois was terminated after reporting that a supervisor ignored a patient's infected wound. She had evidence, texts, photos, records. She won the case, but the facility just changed its name and kept operating. This tactic has a name, the ghost flip. It's when ownership changes on paper to dodge accountability. It happens every day. And who owns these nursing homes? Not nurses, not doctors. Many are owned by investment groups. To them, your grandmother is a line item. In 2022, research showed that nursing homes owned by private equity firms had worse outcomes. More hospitalizations, more medication, less staff, more deaths within 90 days. Why? Because cutting one aide saves money. Because fewer nurses mean fewer wages. Because one less ER visit avoids a fine. In this system, life is measured in margins, and dignity is the first thing cut. Let's talk about money. A shared room in a U.S. nursing home costs nearly $8,000 per month. A private room? Over $9,000. Most families can't afford it, so they rely on Medicaid. Medicaid funds 62% of all long-term care residents. That means taxpayers are funding this system. But where does the money go? Up to 40% goes to owners and admin, not to care, not to food, not to nurses, not to patients. Here's how they do it. One company owns the home, another owns the land, another provides the staff, another caters the food, all owned by the same people. So they pay themselves, and on paper, the nursing home looks broke. But in reality, the money flows through different pipes. It's legal, it's common, and it's why so many people suffer while someone else gets rich. Let's talk about real lives. Mr. Alvarez, a mechanic, lay in soiled sheets for 13 hours. Ms. Thompson, with Alzheimer's, wandered outside and froze. The alarm had been broken for months. Mr. Jenkins asked his daughter to take him home. She couldn't. 2 weeks later, he died from septic shock. In each case, no one was charged. Maybe a fine, maybe a report. The average penalty? Between $500 and $3,000. That's what a life is worth. The public doesn't know, not because it's hidden, but because the truth is scattered. One news story here, one lawsuit there, and between them, silence. This isn't rare. It's systemic. The system works, just not for the people inside it. What happens when someone enters a place designed to erase? There's a term for it, institutional regression. It means a person loses who they are faster, surrounded by strangers, no choices, spoken to like a child, heavily medicated. They fade, not from illness, but from the environment. Even people who arrive walking and talking can become nonverbal in months. Not from disease, but from a slow erosion of identity. Some stop asking questions. When is my daughter visiting? Can I eat in my room? Why can't I go outside? Then they stop asking anything. That's when the system wins. A nurse named Holly worked in Ohio for 12 years. She called the residents my people. She painted nails, read books, played dog videos. She was reprimanded for spending too much non-care time. Eventually she was laid off, but she stayed as long as she could, because she said someone had to see them. Where are the lawmakers? They know. Reports are published. Hearings are held. But change is slow. Lobbyists are strong. The industry spends over $30 million per year influencing Congress. Reform bills are shelved or delayed because every fix costs money, And the people suffering can't protest, they can't organize, they can't vote, they can't march, so they are forgotten. Change doesn't always arrive like a thunderclap. Sometimes it enters quietly, through a door left slightly ajar. A daughter installs a hidden camera. A staff member refuses to sign a false report. A local journalist answers a late-night call because something just didn't sound right. Revolutions don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear scrubs and trembling hands. In Michigan, a woman named Clara lost her father to dehydration. The nursing home claimed he refused fluids. But Clara knew something was wrong. She filed suit, not for money, but for the truth. She demanded the internal logs. The facility fought for 13 months. When the records were released, they told a different story. Falsified hydration notes, copy-pasted daily entries, nursing shortages hidden in digital schedules. Clara didn't settle. She went public. 6 weeks later, the facility shut down. In Florida, another woman took a different route. She printed a poster-sized photo of her mother's bruises. She stood outside the front door, silent. 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day for a month. No signs, no speeches, just a picture. Drivers honked, media showed up, admissions dropped. The facility released a statement. We are committed to transparency and continued improvement. It wasn't an apology, but it was something, a crack in the wall. Some regulators refused to stay quiet. In Oregon, a state inspector found 97 violations in just 9 homes. He was told to revise the tone of his report. He refused. He resigned. And then he published everything. Public outrage followed. 3 homes lost their licenses. New legislation was introduced within 10 months. Sometimes, even from behind a desk, someone changes the system. A Medicaid auditor flags fraud across multiple companies. A public defender challenges abusive guardianship rulings. A lawmaker reads the bill word for word and refuses to look away. They work in silence, but they move mountains. There are also nursing homes that do it right, places where residents choose their meals, set their own schedules, keep pets, grow gardens, where staff are trained in empathy, not just in charting. One home in New York has no alarms on the doors. Instead, sensors under the floors detect distress without locking anyone in. Another in Oregon has a 1-to-6 staff ratio, double the national average. Their secret? They're nonprofit. They reinvest every dollar, and their residents live longer. So why don't all homes do this? Because they're not forced to, because they don't have to, because too often no one's watching. But change is possible. Transparency laws can work. Family watchdogs can help. Independent inspectors can hold power. Medicaid can support in-home care. So fewer people are forced into institutions. But none of it matters, unless people care enough to ask. The deeper problem is cultural. In America, aging is treated like a failure. We Photoshop wrinkles. We dye gray hair. We pretend old age doesn't exist. So we plan poorly. We panic. And we outsource. But what if we change the script? Not putting someone away, but supporting a new chapter. Not losing independence, but redefining it with dignity. Other countries have done it. In Denmark, elderly care is guaranteed at home. In Japan, robots bring meals so nurses can spend more time with people. In the Netherlands, students live in nursing homes, bridging generations with laughter and memory. These aren't fantasies, they're real, and they work. Back here in America, someone dies in a nursing home every 2.4 minutes, not all in neglect. Many are loved, many are held, but too many are missed. A hand unheld, a name unspoken, a final breath unnoticed behind a curtain. And the worst part? No one even realizes how much was lost. In some indigenous traditions, you must say the names of your ancestors aloud, or they vanish from the world of the living. It's more than a ritual. It's a belief that memory is sacred. To speak a name is to declare, you mattered, you were here, and your story is not lost. That's why this documentary exists, not just to inform, but to remember. Because if history is shaped by those who tell it, then the future is shaped by those who refuse to forget.